Amen. It is hard to compete, to lay the Bible up against such impressive song lyrics. And that I hadn't even considered, which we should have been using this entire time. But we'll continue with what we have. We've been exploring the Lord's Prayer, following these phrases, and today I want to invite us into this phrase of our daily bread. Give us this day our daily bread. Just close your eyes for a moment and feel that. Take that in. Maybe if you have bread at your table, place your hands on it and break it and taste it. When I think of this phrase, our daily bread, give us this day our daily bread, this prayer that Jesus is teaching his disciples, who already know how to pray, by the way, but have asked for a prayer that is something they will answer with their very lives. Our daily bread. The first thought that comes to my mind is a few years ago, Lila was in daycare from about 7 months to 18 months. And her daycare teachers taught her sign language. And among it was more, just this little more. She could use it whenever she wanted more, no matter what it was, but where she most frequently used it was right here in the Abbey. She and Mike sitting at this table over here, I would come to the table for communion and I would begin the talking, which must have seemed endless to her, and she would start going like this, more. And sometimes eventually there's just so much talking before there's actual bread breaking that she'd start to make sounds like, hello, notice me. And so occasionally she'd actually start to cry in waiting for communion. And sometimes she would just come right up and stand next to me, and I'd give her bread before and during and after, like just constant communion. She ate so little sometimes that I thought about pretending to do communion at home. Actually, I did once. It did not encourage her to eat her dinner. But here in this space, this bread that we break together, she always wanted more. Just made this little motion. I think it's such a profound theological statement, more, from a little toddler. More communion, more of this taste of one another. Jesus spent most of his time that we know about at table, or some of his best times. He broke bread with the folks he wasn't supposed to break bread with. He sat down at table with all kinds of people in all kinds of places and moments. And I think that Bethany was probably his favorite place to sit down. I don't have any absolute evidence of that, but the people he seems to love most throughout the entire gospel, in all of them, is Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. Their home. Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, this family that he makes out of friends. We can see him, we can feel him, we can imagine him at table breaking bread. And the very last thing he does before his crucifixion, before the events of Holy Week, before everything comes undone and only to be resurrected in Easter Sunday surprise, he's breaking bread with those who loved him and would stand by him at the cross in his trauma, those who would deny him, those who would desert, those who would hide, and those who would betray. He broke bread with everyone. He had this entire ministry of breaking bread with those most intimate and then those most far-flung. The great miracle stories of our Christian scriptures are about food. Jesus feeding 1,000 or 2,000 or 5,000. And I don't know if that's like preacher counting or someone with like a spreadsheet, like Mike Ramsey would count different. There's one particular story in the Gospel of John where the disciples say to Jesus, you need to let the crowd go home because it's time for them to get ready for dinner. And we didn't plan in our strategic plan for dinner. We were not aware of dinner. And Jesus says, no, it's up to you. Throws them this right away, this hard action that they are probably like, what on earth is this man asking of us? This is unreasonable. This is not possible. This is impractical. We should go home. And then the accountant in the group calculates how long it would take all of them to work to get enough food to feed everyone sort of marginally at a buffet. But Jesus persists. And then he teaches them. He takes a loaf of bread and a few fish from the smallest child there, and he lifts it up and he breaks it, and as a symbol to everyone, he teaches them. See, the miracle of these feeding moments isn't like magic. It isn't manna from heaven. It is everyone who opened their baskets and shared what they had. Everyone shared what they had, and in the end, there was more than enough. There was extra. There were doggy bags for folks to take home. See, Jesus inherited this tradition that named food, that named care, that named everyone needs to have enough. He knew the words of the prophets. They had sunk into him where he could say, everyone deserves this life and life abundant. The prophets railed against the greed of those who have the most, that keep other people hungry, treat them with disregard. Aubrey Hendricks talks about Jesus in this way as making people's needs holy. Needs are holy. Bread is holy. The everyday is holy. That drink of water that sustains you and keeps you moving is holy. I imagine all of that as he teaches his disciples, give us this day our daily bread. He's not asking for a trust fund that will prepare you to be fed for the rest of your life. He is not asking for a McMansion or anything that would look to the world like prosperity. And he is not asking for just his or some individual portion of bread. Give me my ration of bread. He's asking for all of our bread. All of us are called to ask that everyone be fed. When I think of this particular word where it says daily, it reminds me of the quintessential story of Hebrew identity. This leaving enslavement in Egypt and going in the wilderness on a journey to this land of milk and honey. And there's this story in Exodus chapter 16, and you can find another version of it in Numbers. It's like 2.0 story of the Hebrew journey. But here they are out in the wilderness, and the people start to murmur. This is apparently an official theological term. It's used in all the commentaries. The people murmured. There's a number of murmurings, which is really a nice way of saying that they are complaining. And they're mad at Moses and Miriam and Aaron for leading them out into the wilderness to die. They've been out there at this point for like 2 months-ish, give or take a few weeks. And they say, if only we had died at the hand of the Lord in Egypt, when we sat by our flesh pots is very different. That's an unfortunate mistake. When we sat by our flesh pots and ate our fill of bread, for you have brought us into the wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. So these folks have cried out in Egypt. They have survived genocide by an oppressive empire. Moses has brought them out into the wilderness. Miriam has danced at the closure of the sea behind them, and they are on a journey, and journeys are not always easy. That joy of leaving enslavement has sort of faded, and they are looking back fondly somehow to the Pharaoh and this flesh pot, which is like a pot of stew that has all the whatever leftover remains, the crumbs from the master's table, the little bits of meat and parts that nobody else wanted. They miss it. That's probably a profound level of hunger. And so Moses interacts with God, and God says, we'll do something about this. And so Moses says to the whole assembly, when the Lord gives you meat, God will give you meat to eat in the evening. It'll come in the form of these quails that apparently just show up and are ready. I'm not sure if they're pre-cooked. And you will eat your fill of bread in the morning, because the Lord has heard the complaining that you have uttered. So God offers them this substance called manna, and then gives them these instructions that each day you go out and you collect the manna. You collect a certain amount for each person in your tent, in your household. You don't collect more, you don't collect less, and you don't leave it overnight and try to keep extra. And so the folks go on the first day, surprised at whatever this strange substance is that has covered the earth that is apparently edible, and they begin collecting it. And just like people, some of them collect more. The very industrious folks collect more. The ones who are so tired of being hungry, who are not quite sure that God really means business here, they collect more. And some apparently collect less, but by the end of the collection period, everyone has the same amount. It's manna. Like, you can't manage it. It's coming from God. And so everyone has the same amount, and then some of them are like, well, I'm not going to eat all of it tonight. I'm going to save some for the morning. And when they do that, it is filled with worms, and it's rotting in the morning. And Moses is like, people, I told you. Eat what you are supposed to eat for this day. In the evening, the quails came and covered the camp, and in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp, and when the layer of dew lifted, there was a substance in the wilderness that was fine and flaky, almost as fine as a frost on the ground. And when the Israelites saw it, they said to one another, what is this? For they did not know what it was. And Moses said to them, it is the bread that the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Gather as much as each of you needs, an omer to a person, according to the number of persons, all providing for those in their own tents. The Israelites did so, some gathering more, some less, but when they measured it with an omer, those who had gathered much had nothing over, and those who had gathered little had no shortage. They gathered as much as each of them needed. And Moses said to them, let no one leave anything over until the morning, but they did not listen. Some left part until the morning, and it was bread with worms and became foul. And Moses was angry with them, and morning by morning they gathered the manna as much as they needed, and when the sun grew hot, it melted. This is the quintessential part of Hebrew identity that Jesus grows up with. the reasons they travel for ritual celebration, to name the Passover, to name the Exodus, to name journeying through the wilderness. There are spaces in all of our lives where we get so concerned about change and difference that we become like the Egyptians, like, can't we go back? But here, Jesus is offering the people in the present and us in the future this reminder of daily bread, reminder of everyone having enough, all of us having enough for the day. It is possible. There is enough. If we would share it, if we would organize our lives around it, if we would be intentional about how we structure the world and our community, there is enough that every child, every person can go to bed warm and well-fed. Give us this day our daily bread. May it be so. Amen.